We don't want to waste anybody's time. Yeah, there's a handout in the back. We got a cheat sheet for you back there. Grab those. Thank you guys for showing up. This is our third installment of the pro panel. Yeah. So good news is that we have been getting transactions come in, and it's working just exactly like it should. I think we even have somebody in the room that called me while I was over at Florida Realtors. She was putting a deal together, and she was just concerned that she was doing it the right way. That was Angela. I was over at the convention. I looked down, saw I missed a call from her. She said it was kind of important. It was about 6:30 or something on a Friday or Saturday. And all she wanted to do was reiterate that you had done the transaction right, correct? All right, so now I'm going to have you tell everybody what you do. Tell them what you did, because Bernardo's going to do it.
Well, the agent was not educated in all of the new stuff, and she was pushing back about if we were doing the right thing, if we were coercing her seller into agreeing to compensate a realtor more than she had originally set out to. And so we had to, I provided the buyer broker agreement, added the compensation in the additional terms section of the contract on page 13, 12, anyway. And then also the seller compensation, seller to buyer's broker addendum.
Sorry, I'm trying to get the door shut back there. So yeah, and so you called me and you were concerned, and she was at the point. Deal was getting executed. It was important to have the documents right at that time. The last thing you want to do is get it executed and come back 2 days later and go, oh, I need you to sign this.
Well, she was a broker for 27 years and said that this wasn't how she does things, and she was questioning me the whole way. I was very frustrated. So yeah, I had to basically call you to confirm that I was doing right, so she could call you if
and
she.
you were spot on.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to point that out. It wasn't that hard, but the fact is, that 27-year broker is probably not the anomaly. In fact, I'm finding that to be the norm. Most people just are sitting on their hands. Most brokerages, most companies, most agents are just kind of letting it sort out and kind of muddling through. That's why we're here. We're not doing that. We're getting out in front of it. We're doing it the right way. The rules have changed. Hey, I used an analogy this morning, and Sheila liked it, so I'm going to use it again. How many in here watch football? How many watch professional football? So I'm a little embarrassed to say this, but y'all know they changed the kickoff rules? I should know this. I'm a football guy. I've been a little busy the last 6 months. I don't know if y'all are aware, but so they changed the rules. You know what the players did? Players just went out there and played the game under the new rules. You guys are all the players. The rules have changed a little bit, but it's nothing. There's still a ball. You still got to tackle. You still got to hit. You still got to catch it. You still got to do handoffs. Okay, the game hadn't changed. The rules have changed a little bit, but players just keep playing the game. So that was my corny little analogy. Sheila thought it was funny this morning. So there you go. Yeah, thank you. Oh yeah, and they got to score. Yeah, score is a closing. That's how you know you're keeping score. Every time you have a closing. You do that closing at Integrity Title. We just had Byron do a video so well on integrity at Integrity Title. So, so if nobody got a chance to jump in last week, Wednesday on the broker update, we had our owner and founder on there give us a State of the Berg address. I like that. State of the Berg. Our State of the Berg. John's so cool. He really is. John's a cool dude. And, he painted a lot of optimism for us out there. But really what he did was let us all know that it's going to be okay, that when the dust settles, Ruttenberg will still be standing, I promise you. With our business model, we are well equipped to ride out any kind of real estate storm that may approach us. Amir's probably got some takes on it too, but, margins are tight, deals are down. A lot of brokerages are squeezing their agents. Where does that go? When the brokerage margins are down, what do they look to get the next money? Well, they're looking to the agents, and maybe they're already on a split, and maybe they're squeezing them a little more. So I did a little Google search real quick before I had John on, and I realized
You're late.
All right. A little fashionably late. Come on down, Mike. So, anyways, the $35 that we charge you has been the same fee. You can have your own real estate marketing business, sales and marketing business for $35 a month. That's pretty phenomenal. But in the year 2000, it was $35. And I've asked John, you think we're ever going to have to raise that? And he said, no, I don't think we're going to have to. Well, $35 today, the inflationary rate is $66. And we haven't had a single fee increase once in 25 years. And this is what I thought was so cool about John. I said, everybody else is changing. They have sign up fees. They have all these things. I go, do you see, that changing with us? And he goes, no, I don't have to. That's a pretty cool place to be at when you don't have to do something for money. So I thought that was really cool. And the other thing that John reminded us is that we're still the 800-pound gorilla in the room. Okay, that's serious, you guys. We are still the largest broker in the marketplace. We're taking the bull by the horns and we're leading by example. Thank you for like Angela and different people that are helping the other brokers out there figure this out. They're left alone. They don't know what's going on. They don't have people digging down. They don't have teams of people here helping you guys understand and navigate the changes. They don't have trainers that we brought on. We brought on 2 additional brokers to get us through this. As you guys know, Jim's been back with us full time, manning the phones. Tracy's in the classroom. I think we had 25 classes on the calendar last month. That's phenomenal. Nobody else is doing that, and we're offering and opening it up to anybody. Just that was pretty cool that we're still the 800-pound gorilla in the room. I got concerned. I get nervous. I work hard to make sure you guys have the right tools to succeed out there. Listen, I fed my family for 20 years on commission only. I'm sure there's people in this room that are doing that too, and we take that very seriously around here. So. You got anything you want to add with our funky little microphones? Maybe we can get a bigger, maybe we get a better budget next time. Get a microphone.
Thank you,
Byron.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming in. So yeah, I mean, Mike and when John came to our broker update last week, it was really great to hear from him and exactly how he started the business and what he's done ever since and not raising the fees, and he doesn't expect to raise the fees, which I think is phenomenal, especially in our current market. So yeah, being that 800-pound gorilla carries a lot of weight here in the Pinellas, Hillsborough, South Pasco area, and so we carry, I don't know, 1,200 listings at any given time. Those are listings that you, if you're working with a buyer, don't have to have a buyer broker agreement to go show, which I think is a great thing. Now, I also think it's great that we have implemented the fact that you have to have a buyer brokerage agreement because I think it's just good business practice. And so I wanted to kind of go over a little bit of a recap here for any of the newer agents who haven't come to the last 2 trainings that we've had. Obviously, everything has August 17th has come and gone. We're still standing. We're still doing business. We're still making offers and closing transactions. I assume by now everybody is well acquainted with buyer brokerage agreement and knows that they have to have a buyer brokerage agreement prior to showing property, unless, of course, it's one of our listings. But I mention it only because we, as Charles Rutenberg Realty agents, we have to be paving that road for everybody. And, I took a call yesterday, and I just want to share this quick story where it was from another agent who clearly they don't have any idea what's going on. He called and said he wasn't one of our agents. And he said, hey, I'm trying to get in touch with one of your agents to show this property. And he said he sent her 2 messages last week, called her, left a message, hasn't got anything back from her. Oh, that's weird because I know the agent. She's very responsive. And I said, well, what do you need from her? And he said, well, I need to know what the seller's offering for compensation before I go show the property. I go, well, that doesn't make sense because you should have a buyer brokerage agreement. And so you know what you're getting paid. You don't need to know if the seller's offering anything. You haven't even decided to make an offer. He goes, no. You don't understand. Yeah, I don't understand. Okay. No, you don't understand. So we went back and forth over this, and then finally he just got fed up and ended up hanging up the phone on me. But I don't know why agents are just and to close that up, I did email our agent, let him know, hey, this agent trying to get in touch with you, please reach out to him. So she didn't lose the sale or whatnot. But at the same time, we as Charles Rutenberg agents are the standard of excellence. We need to be helping other agents out there to learn how this business is going to be moving forward. With that buyer brokerage agreement, for those new agents out there, we do have three different forms that you could use. Well, we actually have four. We have the property pre-touring agreement, which, of course, is a one pager. You can use that for, with that Zillow lead or that realtor.com lead or that client that was just referred to you who you're still trying to build the relationship with. Now, that's not going to hold any teeth, if they go behind your back and try to purchase the home strictly from the straight from the seller and whatnot. You may have a hard time trying to get that held up in court. But then, of course, you have the showing agreement, which is property specific. And just to give you some other war stories out there, we had an agent um, last week, a very high volume agent. She had a Zillow lead that came through. I listened to the entire Zillow call because they record them. She did everything right from A to B or A to Z. And she ended up having the call with them, telling them, "Hey, things have changed. You're going to have to sign a buyer agreement prior to me showing you this property." And it wasn't her listing, of course; it was somebody else's. And she, the customer or consumer said, "Yeah, no problem. We're fine to do that for this property." They met at the property. They stood out front. They signed the showing agreement for this property. Phenomenal, great. She's going along with it. The listing agents, it was like a $1.8 million home, so the listing agents there too. They all had great camaraderie, good rapport. Went through the home, spent about an hour and a half, and they talked about making an offer, but they said they want to hold off for the weekend. It was Labor Day weekend, and so she gets a text message on Sunday says, "Hey, can we see that property again? We want to talk about making an offer as well." So she says, "Yeah, absolutely." Then comes Tuesday morning, she gets the listing agent gets a call from the another agent saying, "Hey, we want to show the property at that same time she had it scheduled," and just happened to mention the buyer's name. So threw up a red flag that it wasn't our agent, it was another agent. So the listing agent calls our agent. Then she reaches out to the buyers, and the buyer says, "Oh yeah, we want to cancel our appointment today. We decided to go in a different direction." And not 10 minutes later, does she get an email from the buyer saying, "We want to cancel our showing agreement as well. We need you to to withdraw and cancel it." No, we're not going to do that. We spent time with you. We told you that we would be compensated when we show you this property. And then, the buyer's getting a little aggravated and whatnot. "I'm sorry, but we are entitled to our compensation." And so the broker of the other agent, not the listing agent, the other agent calls me and says, "Hey, these people are really upset. They want you to cancel your list or your showing agreement with." Sorry, if you guys want to make an offer, if they want to use your agent, fine, let's work out a referral of some sort. We don't want to hold anything up for the buyer, but at the same time, the buyer owes us compensation. These are going to happen over and over again, but we want you to understand that we're going to stand behind you. So, as long as you're doing everything the correct way. I've told the other broker, "Hey, let's make it work." They don't seem like they want to make it work, so we're going to stand behind our showing agreement, and that home will be, off limits to that buyer until that agreement is no longer valid, which is into next year. So maybe it's going to sell by then. I don't know. Um, but I think it's important that you understand the different buyer brokerage agreements. And so that showing agreement adds some teeth to it, more so than the property pre-touring agreement. And then, of course, you have two exclusive buyer brokerage agreements. Those, of course, are exclusive agreements, like they say in the name. We have the one that Mike created. It's a phenomenal two-page document, very friendly to read. And then you also have the Florida Association of Realtors form, exclusive buyer brokerage agreement, and that's got a little bit more legal jargon in it. Both are really great to use. They're exclusive. So, just wanted to give you that little recap. Hey, make sure you're using the buyer brokerage agreements before you're going out there and showing properties. It's very important. Now let's jump into listing agreements a little bit. Everybody should be using the brand new listing agreement. If you have an old listing that has been on the market prior to August, I think 17th. Thanks for that. Hopefully you've modified it now and you're able to bring it into compliance. As we've said time and time again, we do not share commissions. So when I say we don't share commissions, that does not mean that a seller cannot offer compensation to a buyer. It's just how it's being paid. So on the listing agreement, paragraph 10, you have A, B, and C. We will not accept any listing agreement that has box A checked because that one specifically says we are sharing commissions, and we're not. Um, of course, we can back it up a little bit, go to paragraph 8, 8A, and that's going to be where you're putting in what your fee is to list and sell the home. Paragraph 10 is where you're, if the seller wants to offer any compensation to a buyer's agent. Um, so we'll dive into that a little bit more as we go on. We have this cheat sheet that Mike, and I put together for y'all. There's some good nuggets in there. Well, I think the whole thing's a pretty good nugget, to be quite honest with you. But we want to put this together for you guys, so it's more of a guideline. Has some good verbiage in there for different scenarios, and of course, as time goes on, things are going to change. We're going to have to add to this, subtract from it. From the time we started it to today, we've already had to modify it a couple times simply because the MLS removed the concession fields from the MLS now. Um, not to toot our own horn, but I think Mike and I kind of said that from the beginning. But toot toot, we were right. So yeah, concession fields have been removed from the MLS. You can still, if the seller wants to offer concessions, make sure that is in your listing agreement. It's on, I think it's paragraph 2E, where they can add in if they wanted to offer concessions to a buyer. A lot of agents still get confused and they think that concession has to do something with commission. I guess because it starts with a C. I don't know, but concession, commission, compensation, two different things. So with the concession field being removed from the MLS, you can still add it into realtor remarks or public remarks, but it has to be as a dollar amount, or you can just state that the seller's open to concessions. It cannot be a percentage. As we've seen, Stellar has been very diligent about handing out fines for any non-compliance. So make sure you go through your listings, make sure that you're not using any type of verbiage. I know that they do have, an AI feature when you are about to submit your listing and validate it, that a lot of times it'll come up if it thinks that you're using any HUD verbiage. Don't just skip over that. Go back to your realtor remarks, go back to your public remarks and reread it. See if you did by accident put, walking distance or, something that would violate fair housing or violate the new policy changes. I know it's, that teacher telling you to check your answers one more time, but it's important. You should do it because it's going to cost you $500 on the first offense. Um, you know, uh, with the concessions, not to beat that dead horse, but concessions are from the seller to the buyer. They are not from the seller to the buyer's agent. And that's where, I want people to understand that it is a concession. It's not a commission. Um, so just mind your, mind yourself when you're doing that. One of the other things I want to talk about is has to do with some risk management. And you know, uh, we go through, or obviously everybody knows we have the Facebook page or the Facebook CRR Clearwater Agents. And even though it is a private group, we can still get in trouble on it. So please be very mindful of the comments that you're putting on there. Um, with regards to risk management, and property steering, things along those lines. We every now and again, maybe not so much on our page, but on other real estate sites, I've seen agents put on there, well, if the seller's not offering anything, I'm not showing that listing. I mean, how can you get any more?
Wait.
How can you violate that policy any more than right there with your name and picture right next to it?
Yep.
I
Yep.
can guarantee you that attorneys and other agents that may not like you are screenshotting that and sending it off to people that shouldn't have it.
Yep.
So please be very careful with what you're putting out there on social media. I know we're going through an election season coming up. That too is something, you're in business for yourself. Things can go really badly when you stay, and it's fine to have your own opinions on things, but keep it professional. Support whoever you want to support, but just keep it professional. I know Mike's got a couple of things he wants to touch on with risk management here, so I'll let him take it over from there.
Yeah. Hey guys, I just want to share exactly printed material that's out there. We want to get this. Is that better? All right. All right. Sorry. we listen. I don't want to sit up here and scare you and fearmonger and do that stuff that they're doing. But I have an obligation to tell you what's going on if you haven't informed yourself to that yet. So just remember this too, and I'm going to go into it. But Florida Realtors in 475, chapter 475, I live in that arena. So when I say 475, guys, that's what I'm talking about, the rules and regs and statutes that govern our business. They don't have anything to do with antitrust laws. You understand that. You could get in trouble and be put out of business financially, but your license still be perfectly intact with 475 and FREC isn't up you. So understand that these are two different things. And it's a new arena that we're playing in right now, guys. New arena. And I don't want to, I want to get through this very quickly and move on to the good stuff. Mike has got a bunch of stuff to talk to you about with this guide we put together for you to operate normal. But I think you need to know this. And exactly what Amir was telling you is that don't get in the comments. Don't be writing down there, you're not going to show XYZ's property because that realtor's not offering a commission. That is steering, and that's antitrust. And I can tell you for a fact, we've gotten calls at the office about it right now from testers. We get a couple hundred calls. Steve knows. He's been in there enough to know. Michael, we get a couple hundred calls a day on average in our office. When you get that one that's really weird and your stomach goes, that wasn't right. Something was wrong about that. First of all, I'm a big person to listen to your gut when it's talking to you like that. And we know that there's people out there trying to get sound bites so they can put us in there. Called Charles Ruttenberg Realty on 9/2, spoke to a Sheila, and she said, yeah, Charles Ruttenberg offers, we share commissions or whatever. They were looking for sound bites. Fortunately, they're trained enough. They're going to get you too. But there's this guy, these consumer groups that were behind the changes here. Understand they're not going away, and now they are more emboldened than ever to get their foot on the throat of the practices in the industry and to get what they want on it. There's this guy in the Merle case, this guy Miller, and it says right here, admitted that Miller was the reason the firm got interested in the case in the first place. Miller and Care, another one of these consumer groups, which, hey, I'm not knocking consumer groups. They're doing what they think is right. They're targeting the workarounds. So the seeing realtor competitors gather as groups to design fee agreements to accomplish this. So they're looking at forms as well. So when you hear us talking about having our own forms and different things, that's because we're not going to be getting into using statewide forms prepared by committees. That can get us in trouble. If 20 of the competitors get in a room and agree to a form, and in that form we share commission back and forth, that gives them a case to start. And also the checkbox. I don't think that's a good idea. The checkbox on the buyer's broker agreements that say, this box, if you don't want me to show you any properties, hold on, we'll get to those, that they're not paying a commission on. That's steering, guys. You've already entered into an agreement with your buyer to pay you a certain amount. By the way, Sheila did send me a message. Please don't put zero in your buyer's agreement. It'll get sent back to you. Or please don't put whatever seller is willing to pay. That's not okay. That's not okay. You know it's wrong. Don't do it. And if you did that just to get them to sign it at the point in time, then you need to sharpen your skills a little bit or find somebody else to work with. But I just want to hit a couple things and we're going to move on. One of the sound bites here, offering commissions. This is directly from Miller, the guy that started this. Offering commissions to buyer brokers off the MLS is a huge mistake. This is what they want. This is what they're coming after. Okay. Moreover, even if offering compensation off the MLS doesn't violate a state's licensing laws, that does not mean it doesn't violate other laws, according to Miller. If antiquated licensing laws say it's okay to share your commission with a buyer broker, that does not mean you can do it and are exonerated from violations of common law or federal antitrust. It's really poor advice. That's his words, not mine. If the listing broker offers fixed amounts to all buyer brokers, the benefit of negotiating the buyer rep fee deteriorates. Do you guys get that? If I'm telling you right off the bat, my seller is going to pay anybody 3%, well, there's no reason for you to come make your offer now for anything less than that. Maybe you were only wanting 1%. Maybe you would only sign an agreement for $1,000. Now we've just told you, we've shown you our cards that are on the table. So I think if you're acting in a fiduciary manner to your seller, how can that be? If I'm telling them that you're willing to pay the full amount, I'm not keeping anything to negotiate or leverage. The current system allows buyers agents all, and I've been saying this for 2 months, just like we were saying the concessions were coming out of the MLS. We got it on tape 2 months ago saying they will take those out. You can see the handwriting on the wall. The current system allows buyer agents all to get paid the same, regardless of their experience or skill. That's not cool. It never has been cool, but that's the way we always did it. Okay, so that's just one. I will move through these quickly so we don't keep you guys bored with scare tactics up here. That's not what I'm trying to do. This is another article. Um, Michael's scared. Yeah, Michael's going to be scared all the way to defense bank representing people for these suits that could be out there. This guy, if you don't think they're coming after specific brokerages, here you go. From my understanding, this is from Gilch, one of the head directors of the consumer group. From my understanding, Compass has no interest in decoupling anything from their trainings and how they have scripts encouraging why the seller should offer buyer broker compensation. It could just as easily insert Charles Ruttenberg, from my understanding, Charles Ruttenberg. But if they're watching any of our tape, they know that that's not correct. That's not what we're doing. Here's one right here. I had an interesting conversation with an Edina Realty agent today in Minnesota, part of Home Services. They're offering 2% as a blanket compensation to all buyers brokers. I asked him, well, that if we reject that 2.7 and do this as a seller concession, will that 2% go back to you or will it go back to the seller? And he says, no, that'll go back to me. So don't do it that way. That's a real problem. That's why I wish Bernardo was here. That's why if you pre-negotiate a fee for the buyer's agent as a listing broker, you're married to that thing. I'll let Michael talk to you more about the legal ramifications of that. But if you take a listing agreement that you've already negotiated a blanket offer out there to somebody else, you got stuff to do with that when the deal comes in. What if it doesn't? And there's a lot of legal ramifications that can come from that. This is the guy that we should all really get a Christmas card to this year or whatever. Michael Ketchmark. He is the chief legal counsel, made about $500 million on a 2-week trial. And I'm sure he's just in it for the love of sellers in the real estate world. The money I think he's going to donate to charity is what I heard. It's the guy. It's the guy that, yeah, did it all. Oh, Ketchmark. So I'll just summarize the top one I wanted to read you here. Basically, they ask him a question is, when, we're all getting ready for August 17th, what are you guys going to do? What's okay and what's not okay? Everybody's looking to get this guy to bless their new forms and their new way of doing business. This is his answer. I don't know. I have to look at what's being done, how it's being done, and how it applies to the terms of the settlement agreement. I'm not going to just say yes or no on any question like that. It's going to be dependent upon the facts. So basically, he said, we're watching you. I don't even know what I'm watching you for. So if I seem a little angry, I am. I don't think it's cool, but it is. So then he said, you mentioned you're going to be looking at what happens. Are you doing, and this is the question, are you doing anything this week or next in terms of prepping for this deadline or deciding how you're going to police it? Sure. There's a team of lawyers from all of the different law firms that are involved in this. Several plaintiffs' law firms with entire teams of attorneys. We have weekly calls, and we are taking very aggressive steps to prepare for the launch of this plan. We plan on staying on top of this as it rolls out. Question to him: will there be any immediate repercussions for MLSs or brokers who break the rules? Listen here. Yeah, if anyone's breaking the rules or violating the agreement, we're going to look for the opportunity to make examples out of anyone who's playing fast and loose with the law. The last thing they're going to want to do is be the person that does that or the corporation does that. I'm happy to have somebody serve as an example of what happens to people who violate, and I love this little Freudian slip, our antitrust laws. Like he owns the antitrust laws now. What people need to realize is that this is him again speaking. What people need to realize is that antitrust, listen here, they're not just civil, but they're also criminal in nature. And at some point, this behavior can cross over into the criminal realm. Can you imagine getting referred over to a prosecutor because you were, offering a blanket offer of compensation on one of your properties? I mean, I'm not here to fearmonger, but I am here to tell you, we would refer it to prosecutors if we believe that there's something illegal, criminal. And with technology out there, it's really easy for all of them to be watching what we're doing, right? You don't need an army of 1 million people now. You need about 10, 17-year-old tech people that could probably monitor the whole country. So what do you anticipate the DOJ would do? They really, truly, this is the answer, they really, truly want to bring about change here for the American homeowners. Really? I fully expect that they're going to be prepared to take actions, even unrelated to the settlement. So if you don't think that they're gearing up and they're looking at us, you just be wrong. And I got one more little quick one here, and I will get back to fun stuff. I promise, guys. Um, DOJ regulators informed NAR executives, including your president, Sears, who's a practicing real estate broker. He's trying. Give the guy credit over there at NAR. He's trying. That the agency was keeping an eye on forms as they update. You've heard us talk a lot about forms here for the last 2 months. It's because we see where they're going with this, and we're just trying to stay ahead of it. Is all we're trying to do. If you're just paying attention, you've probably got 60 to 90 days of competitive advantage over the competition, in my experience. Just pay attention to what's going on out there. The meeting and subsequent memo to NAR's 1.5 million members is the latest indication of how closely the DOJ is watching the real estate industry after the Sitzer Burnett verdict. So, you've got these consumer groups have made it their mission to be watching us and make sure we're behaving the way they feel we should. They're in the DOJ's ear. They're watching. So the last thing is the two terms they talked about here was commercial bribery and group boycott. I have printouts of them if you'd like to know what they are. It's really easy. You can Wikipedia it. Do I know where this is going? No, but do I darn sure know for a fact that they're watching? And for you to get into a Facebook group chat or whatever you're doing, talking about brokerages that you called and they're not offering commissions is not a smart move on your part. I can tell you, it's not a smart move at all. Just do the things the new way of business. There is a new normal. Listing agents, just go negotiate your commission. You don't have to negotiate the buyer's agent commission anymore. Let them do that. It's not that complicated, really. Just let them negotiate their commission. And if you feel the need to do that, and I would do it in the form of a concession to the other side. So, all right, that's my rant.
Yeah, so last week, I came across a file where we have a seller to buyer's broker compensation agreement, correct? Yes. Dated, signed and dated, I don't know, let's call it August 21st. And the seller agrees to 2% to the buyer's broker. Then there was another little starred line item that the buyer was going to pay the listing agent's transaction fee of $350. Okay, fine. So then when I send a prelim settlement statement out to the agent, they're like, no, that's wrong. We have a new one. So she sends me a different one dated 4 or 5 days later, August 27th, that states the seller is going to pay the buyer's broker 2.5%. That little extra note is now gone. The agent is saying, no, it still applies. No, it does not. Had a conversation with this genius right here next to me, and it does not apply. You didn't bring over the little note, then it does not apply. The other one, the newer one supersedes. Amir also suggested that they probably should have used.
So, in the new form that they put out there is fine if they would have carried over the other information. However, they didn't. So the better way to have done that was to grab the modification to the compensation agreement, seller to buyer's broker, or seller's broker to buyer's broker, whichever one it was. So make sure you're out. You take a look at all the forms, and do things. Slow down, do things a little bit better. The forms are out there. Florida realtors, they try to do a very good job of putting out there what we need. When Mike was over at the convention 2 weeks ago, um, he was in a room with a bunch of brokers, and they were talking about, how are they going to negotiate compensation in the contract. And so they put up a slide where they said we're working on this form. And within 3 weeks later, we got two new forms. So kudos to them. They just came out yesterday, the seller's agreement with respect to buyer's broker compensation and the credit related to buyer's broker compensation. I know Mike just got them as well, so we haven't had a chance to really dive into them, but they do solve problems that we are currently find ourselves getting into with the new policy changes. So, I know I started today with talking about some of the changes that have happened since within the past since the settlement happened. But since our last meeting, a couple of changes since August 19th. We did get new contracts that came out. Now, the new as is contract, well, all the contracts, commercial, vacant land, the Florida contract, the as is contract, they were all changed. Now, not much in there changed except for um, the last page of the contract where it specifically talks about the MLS. And they really only took out two words. It was, I think, MLS and or. So they didn't do much, but at the same time, I would bring this to your attention because if you want your E&O policy to cover you, you need to be using the most up to date form. So if you have this contract saved to your desktop, please get rid of it and get the most recent form to start using that one. Um, you know, people often, they're asking, how do I tie the compensation to the contract? And I'll let Mike dive into that a bit. But a lot of us have not actually read the entire contract, and the last paragraph on the last page of the contract specifically gives instructions to the closing agent about how your compensation should be, or how they should address your compensation. And it specifically states that they should look to other agreements, and those other agreements could be the buyer broker agreement, could be the listing agreement, it could be the compensation agreement. So your lender and your title company will most likely ask you for these documents, and I think it's in your best interest to give them to them. Um, Before we move on for a couple of things, I want to touch base on the MLS transaction fee. I hate calling it that because it's not a transaction. It's not an MLS fee. All it is a brokerage fee that the listing agent didn't want to pay, so they're passing it on to the buyer's agent. I, as everybody knows, we don't share commissions here at Charles Ruttenberg Realty. So, but that doesn't mean other brokerages out there are not sharing commissions. There are some brokerages out there that are still sharing commissions. So you may get a compensation agreement given to you where they are saying we're giving you 3% minus 395. Yes, that is okay. It's okay for them to do that because they are still collecting the bucket of commission, and then out of that bucket, they're giving you a portion of it, and they're taking back that junk fee that they put in there. At Charles Ruttenberg Realty, we are not sharing commissions. So in paragraph 8A, we're putting what our fee is. And then the fee that's being paid to the buyer's agent is coming directly from the seller. It's not coming out of our portion. So we cannot take a transaction fee out of that fee that the seller is paying to the buyer's agent. Um, I hope that makes sense because there seems to be a lot of, I get that question almost daily. Um, and what Mike talked about when you're writing up the listing agreement, you're meeting your seller and you're giving them the options on, hey, how do you want to handle the buyer's compensation? Yeah, there's two options that we can give you as agents. You can either put a fee out there and allow me to tell the other agent what that fee is, or don't offer anything, and then let's tell them to put it in their offer. But if they choose option A or choose option B and offer compensation to a buyer's agent, it is your responsibility to convey that to the buyer's agent. They've put it in there authorizing you to offer it. You need to offer it. Now, I ran into a situation last week, earlier this week. Um, we had an agent who she had 2.5% that the seller wanted to offer. It was a new listing. She got showing requests. She never got a question or a text or anything from the buyer's agents asking if the seller was offering any compensation. And then she received 3 offers. Not one mention of, is the seller offering compensation? Offers were great, perfect, but there was no offer of compensation. So we have to be left to assume that the buyer is paying the compensation. So before she she presented the offers to her client, to the seller, and told them, hey, they never asked, so I never proactively told them that you're offering compensation. They didn't bring anything, so you don't owe them anything. Only he does, because he did put it in there. So what they ended up doing is doing a modification before they started looking at the offers to remove the compensation. So then they're not under any legal document saying they have to give it to. And then they went under contract where the seller's not even paying a consent or paying a commission. So to all the naysayers out there, you will get offers where buyers are going to pay their agent, and it's going to be fine. So, but just going back to it, if you do put it in there, you should tell the other agent, or if you're asked, you should tell them, and follow it up with a commission or compensation agreement. Mike, do you have any?
We got a quick question
Yeah,
here
yeah,
from Dave.
go for it. Well, that's coming directly from the seller. The seller can offer whatever they want to offer. If they want to offer it to every agent out there, that's fine. He was saying that if a Aetna Realty, whoever it was telling their agents that they must offer a blanket commission on all of their listings of at least 2.7%. It wasn't coming from the seller; they were still sharing commissions. So they were going to the seller, "Hey, Mr. Seller, you want to our fee is 6%. We're gonna share some of that, and of that 6%, we are putting a blanket out there that all of our listings have a minimum of 2.7% on it."
It's just not necessary. It's just not necessary. No, in that situation, you can, but you can't turn it around the other way and demand to know. Like the example Amir said, agents are calling the office from other brokerages saying, you have to tell me what they're offering. No, we don't. Remember, with this spirit is we are supposed to cooperate with other agents, right? We entered into an agreement with the board and it being realtor and all that. We're supposed to cooperate with them except when
It's
it's
not in the
not in
best
the
interest.
best interest of your seller or your client. It's not in the best interest of my client to pull their cards out of the pocket and put it on the table for you. We're merging two stories here on that. We're merging two scenarios. If you have a seller, listen, really what it comes down to is market conditions. What in the world during COVID were people paying 6% commissions? Seriously. I was getting 48 offers in half a day on a property. Why would you pay a commission to a buyer's broker? There's no reason to. Let the buyer pay their own. Just write 20 grand out of the offer and pay your own agent. It just makes no sense. And I will say there's some things that have come to light that kind of make sense. Look at the car industry, for example. You realize there's certain times during COVID they weren't offering any deals, were they? No deals whatsoever. The market gets a little funny. Guess what? 0% interest. We got rebates. We got all kinds of things. You got to be market sensitive. I'll tell you, if you're not sure about the market, just watch Lennar. Watch Lennar. They're a national builder with a lot of data, and they move their rates very quickly. When demand is up, they'll lower them. When supply is up, they'll raise them. Okay, I'm not saying watch Lennar, but I'm just saying watch. It doesn't make any sense in a great seller's market to be offering maximum commissions. It really doesn't if I'm the seller. But that's where things are different. Where the industry has folded out to many years and decades that was just the norm, and that was what we did. The listing agent, which now a lot of people are appreciating those listing agents, went and negotiated all of y'all's commissions, right? Like I said 100 times, and I was a listing agent for a long time. I would just be licking my chops. I would be going in there and killing every appointment I had. Hey, I'm only talking to you today about what they're going to pay me or what you're going to pay me. I don't have to go pre-negotiate this 2 or 3% for the other side of the transaction any longer. And to get what we get sometimes, it just didn't make any sense whatsoever. Dave's got a quick question.
Yeah, so I'm used to writing offers and receiving offers, and in the additional terms, putting in seller to compensate buyer broker, 2.5%. Our seller, my seller, listed. I have a 2.5%. They have an offer for 2.5% to the buyer's broker. If I receive a offer and it says that the seller provide buyer's broker 3%, even though they have on accepting contract. You got to be smart enough to catch that, strike it out, and say 2.5 before you get it accepted and signed. Or, what kind of legality do they have if they slipped in at 3%, but you're listing offering at 2.5?
I'll give my opinion, and then I'll let Mike jump on that. From my window on Main Street here, if you put it in the contract that the seller is going to pay 3% to the buyer broker. But the seller is saying in their listing agreement they were only going to pay 2.5. The last sentence of the contract says this contract shall not modify any offer of compensation made by the seller or listing broker to cooperating brokers. So the 2.5 should stand. What's in the contract itself can't change the other agreement. Now, you could do a compensation agreement, outside of that and get it done to modify it. But
Yeah, sorry. So with that statement you just stated and the issue that you had with the closing with that other agent, was that side note added into the listing agreement? You see
it
what I'm saying?
wasn't.
Okay.
We have to assume it wasn't because we didn't see it. But it was in a compensation agreement, which is a document signed by seller, signed by buyer broker. So it should be fine between them.
But that is why you're the broker. Skill, care, and diligence, that's the minimum services we require, to provide. You should catch that in a contract. If somebody's offering over, more than you're offering to pay, then you have an agreement with, that should be changed and corrected immediately.
And I would say that, and I've said this the last couple times that we were here, it is now more than ever very important that when you do send your new contract to Integrity Title, that you make sure that we have your buyer broker agreements, anything that talks about your commissions. I mean, whether it's your listing agreement, your seller to buyer's broker compensation, we need to have that information at Integrity Title.
Yeah, absolutely. You should send it over to
I don't
ensure that.
know what your other, I don't know. I can't imagine you're using any other title company, but we're at Integrity Title are going to be sure that we ask you for those.
Yeah, and the fact is that you really do want to be doing business with people that are up to date on the industry changes, which the last thing in the world you want to do is get to a title company that doesn't know how to process a transaction because they're still doing deals prior to August 17th. You're going to be fighting an uphill battle, just like with your lender, your insurance, everything. You should be working with people that are up to date on it.
So I guess I had some comments on it. So the idea was that the seller offered compensation in a listing agreement for 2.5%, but in the actual additional terms of the offer that came in, it was written that seller agrees to pay buyer's broker 3%. Am I understanding that fact
That's correct.
correctly? I think that seller has to compensate that buyer's broker 3%.
If they executed it
If
without
they execute
countering it.
Yes, yes. But the buyer and seller could also agree to strike that entire sentence, and the seller doesn't have to pay the buyer's broker anything. Okay, because if we did the listing agreement the way I'm suggesting that we did it, basically on 10B, that is just really what the seller is instructing the listing agent to say what compensation the seller is prepared to offer if an acceptable price, if the price comes in at the full listing price.
Guess what I'm trying to say is that obviously any of the agents that are having this come in is talk to the seller, do a strike through, and actually move it to the 2.5 they were originally asking to, instead of being stuck with paying a 3% if they don't catch it.
Well, yeah, you would want to make sure you strike it. I mean, I wish the 10B really didn't. I like the idea of the concept, but really what it should say, seller authorizes broker, instead of to offer compensation to buyer's broker, it really should just say seller authorizes broker to advertise that seller is willing to accept offers of some compensation amount.
Up to 2.5%. Like to see up to.
Yeah.
And these things are all fluid, Mike, and we
Yeah,
know these forms are changing as we speak.
I really like the idea of the compensation to the buyer's broker. And when we start talking about I call it my cheat sheet, my guidelines that I wrote up, um, with the help of these guys, that, you know, we want to get out of the total buyer broker's compensation altogether. Um, that needs to be something from the seller to the buyer's broker directly. So I think we're getting closer. These two new forms that Amir just sent me this morning is going to get a little closer to that. Do we want to maybe break though before I kind of start hammering through? So my intention is is the handout that I gave you is to try to rattle through that and give you all so I tried to come up with all the scenarios that you may face as an agent on the selling side and and on the buyer side. I'm not agreeing with all the things that I wrote up here. I'm giving you all the things so that you may come across so you're prepared to see the different ways you may see this coming through. So on the cliffhanger for a break, we'll be right back. Oh, wait. All right.
So would you say that best practice would be if we have a buyer's broker agreement with our buyer and we have negotiated that they're going to pay 2.5%, but we are, our compensation as a buyer's agent, we can still try to negotiate in the contract and get a higher offer, a higher compensation, which would technically kind of supersede. And at that point, we would do a modification up, or would it be best practice for us to have the maximum, which I've been doing, and then if we agree to drop down because the seller is only paying X amount of dollars after we negotiated to then go down? Because I'm going to try to push as much as I can.
You can't have a maximum because that would be considered a range, and the NAR settlement said you can't have a range. So you can't have quote a maximum. You have to be as a you have to say you have to have an objectively ascertainable commission, which we'll go through this. I like what you're thinking, and I do agree with the idea that let me put the 3, and if I need to break it down, I could break it down. Fine. The only catch up hook I heard you say was, well, it says 2.5. I'll put 3, and then I'll have a modification signed to go up to 3. The modification should be signed contemporaneously or prior to the offer being signed, so that way it's not the timing is I agreed to 2.5. I put in the contract 3, and now I'm having to go back and amend my agreement to say 3. It really should be the same contemporaneous thing that either, yes, amend it to 3 because, hey, I've got the counter offer ready to go and it's going to compensate me to 3. Here is the counter offer acceptance for you to sign along with amendment of my BBA to show 3. Fine. But don't try to do it where it's I've agreed to
The
3
other
and
way.
then I'm
Okay.
upping it to 3.
Because the one deal that I had contacted you about, that seller was only offering 2%, but my buyer was, they were coming in super high above ask. They were offering a an escalation. They were paying a gap. So I really worked the deal and was going to be compensated. And the situation between, well, the seller said they were only going to pay 2%, but if I'm negotiating and bringing a great offer, would they be willing to compensate me the additional 1%? And as long as I have my buyer broker agreement that matches that, then that supersedes whatever listing agreement that seller has with their listing agent because I have negotiated based off the terms of the offer agreement.
So
Does
to
that
make
make
sure
sense?
so that was a lot for me to make sure I did. So if the BBA is 3%, so your agreement with your buyer, and then on the I think if I understand your question is, but if the seller had previously agreed with the listing agent that the compensation was going to be 2.5%, if the seller makes a deal with you to pay you the 3%, that's going to supersede what the arrangements the seller had discussed with his listing agent. Yeah. So we'll take.
Two different agreements.
Yeah.
The agreement that the listing agent got into with the seller has nothing to do with this contract now. So supersedes is one way to think about it, but just two different contracts. They've entered into a subsequent contract with you to agree to pay you more, has nothing to do with that agreement between the other two parties. All right, so
Okay.
let's take a quick break and then we'll come back and Michael can dig
10 minutes,
into
guys.
a quick 10-minute break and Michael will come in and talk to you.
Okay, we can start now. So now, Michael, first I want to say it's probably not on. This lovely little being a realtor after the NAR settlement, I have to give credit because I didn't, that this was put together by Michael, Mike, and Amir. I probably should have put their names somewhere on there. So Michael's going to take it away now.
Am I on now? Okay. So, um, Mike and Amir and I worked on this for quite a while, and I had a lot of thoughts on this. And I tried to condense it down to as much as I could cram onto 2 pages to cover as many scenarios as possible. This is not a final version. Actually, this is probably version number 18 of what was originally started like 3 weeks ago. And it's changed a whole bunch, and it already needs to be changed again as of this morning. So this was written primarily by me in terms of the fact that I kept it very broad to be used at other brokers too. So as much as I love Charles Rutenberg too, I work with a lot of brokers, so I created this to go around. So you're going to see things that there may be policies and procedures done that I'm discussing here so you understand them. And there's also things that Ruttenberg doesn't really want. So like the first one, okay, which is I think one of the biggest things, and I do agree with Ruttenberg's stance on this, is, and I'm going to try to go through everything on this, and I'm going to try to go through quickly because I'm going to try to do it in the next 45 minutes. So, um, listing agent taking that new listing, we want to stay out of paying the buyer's broker's commission. Okay, the whole idea, the whole concept on the new listing is that it's going to be you're just negotiating your side. Hey, I charge you 3% to handle the listing of your property, and then we're going to work out what we're going to do to the buyer's agent. Okay. But right now I'm here to negotiate with, I'm presenting to you that I'm going to handle this. Now, I think it is very smart for you to offer compensation to the buyer's agent. Okay. When I'm talking to my seller. So do that. Go ahead and preface the seller, hey, look, you're going to be offering likely compensation to the buyer's agent, and this is what the norm is. Okay, so yes, while we normally did it at 6%, you're still going to be doing it at 6%, but right now we're just handling my side as this number. So 1A, stay out of paying the buyer's broker. Okay, listing agent really just needs to establish what they're charging. Listing agent's commission goes in provision 8A of the listing agreement. Now, I didn't put all the listing agreements in here, but 8A is designed for what the total compensation is designed for. But what I'm telling you is that what I really only want you to put on there is your side of the compensation if there's two agents. So AKA the 3%. Okay. 10B of the listing agreement, that's my bullet point number 2B, but section 10B of the listing agreement is where you're offering compensation to the buyer's agent. Okay, so I'm charging, let's go to try to make sure we keep it in the right spots here. I'm charging you, seller, 2% commission. So 2% is going to go into 8A. That's what I'm charging you, 2%. And we're going to offer 3% to the buyer's agent. Don't shoot me. I'm just picking these numbers out of the blue. We're going to suggest that you advertise to be paying a buyer's agent directly 3%. The 3% goes in 10B. But what happens if I have both sides of the deal and I'm doing the work for both sides? I'm not going to just do it for that 2%. I want to charge 4%. So then I've covered you there on my sub point 3, 1B3. Lastly, to cover when a buyer is not represented or when you have both sides right under the additional terms of the listing agreement, if the listing agent procures a buyer or the buyer is unrepresented, then the compensation set forth in 8A shall be a total of X. Now I've covered you for both scenarios. If you're paying another commission, then you're going to be paying that to under 10B. And then I'm only getting the number in 8A. But if I bring in the buyer or the buyer's unrepresented, then I'm getting the line item listed under additional terms. Does anybody have any questions about that? It's not real complicated. Keeps it a very simple agreement, very simple to understand. And I'm a big firm believer in not tinkering with forms, so I tried to keep it very simple, a one sentence thing. Make sense? Okay. So that's how I'm suggesting that you should do your listings. The 10B statement that I was just commenting before we took a break was that I really don't like the idea that you're offering compensation. Really, all you're doing in 10B is saying to the buyer's agents, this is what the seller is prepared to do. You're nothing more than just advertising that the seller in their mind is prepared to pay some sort of compensation. So I wish they would word it a little bit more that really you're just conveying what the seller is prepared to do, but that's how they have it worded now. So that's what you should understand, that really the 10B compensation of the buyer's broker is really what you're advertising that the seller is prepared to accept at a full price offer. How to handle compensation to the buyer's agent. Okay, so I know I covered under this to the listing agent side of things, but that's when I started writing it. That's how I did it. So it's a little out of place in some respects, but on the same token, you as a listing side need to be prepared on how you're going to be offering compensation. So the best method, obviously, is to have the seller to be paying the buyer's broker using a separate compensation agreement. So as I point out, use the compensation agreement, seller to buyer's broker form, have it ready to rock and roll. Now, I had written this before we got the forms that just came out this morning that I got. Well, they came out yesterday. So under the main contract, how do we make sure that if you're writing up the offer and using a seller to buyer's broker form, how do we know that the seller is simply not going to sign the contract and never sign the compensation from seller to buyer's broker? Does everybody understand that concept? I, buyer, am presenting an offer. The listing agent told me that the seller is going to be paying me directly. So I present an offer, 200,000 for the house. I present a seller to buyer's broker compensation form of 3%. How do I know that the seller is just going to not say, I accept one, but don't take the other one? Okay. So we have that concern. So to tie them together, I wrote the statement on C12. This contract is contingent upon seller's acceptance of the compensation agreement, seller to buyer's broker with ABC Realty. Now, I've seen it. Some brokerages do an alternative to this, and I wrote that under, I continued. And an alternative to this, which I'm saying, which may be ineffective, and I don't think it's a very good way of doing it, and I don't agree with it. So I'm not suggesting that you do it, but I've seen this, is to check the addenda box other and write compensation agreement. But remember, checking an addendum that doesn't exist from an agreement between a seller and a buyer's broker, it's not designed to work that way. They don't work that way. That they're not supposed to work that way. Now, the alternative to this is using this new rider, which Amir shared with me this morning, okay, which is seller's agreement with respect to buyer's broker compensation. I think it does the same thing that my one line sentence does. It's fine for that. How do you protect yourself as the buyer, as an agent? How do you protect yourself from, before you ever even made this offer? How do you make sure you don't get screwed? You have the BBA or the showing agreement. That's how you make sure you get screwed. You don't get screwed. You have that standalone agreement that says, buyer, if you buy a property, I'm going to get paid no matter what. Right now, though, I want to make sure that I'm getting paid from the seller. So you want to make sure you tie these offers together, that if you're relying on me to get getting paid from the seller, even though you have that obligation to pay me anyway, you need to make sure you tie my offer together with some other agreement. You can use what I wrote. You can use the additional rider GG that was just promulgated, which essentially says the seller agrees to enter into a buyer's broker agreement within 3 days with the buyer's broker. If not, buyer can cancel the contract. Okay, that's what this new GG rider is. Do you have that up yet? It is not. It is not online at this point in time. In fact, I was reluctant to remove the word draft watermark across the whole thing uh, because I'm still nervous myself. In fact, I've gone through a lot of different scenarios of trying to make the different practices better, but I'm nervous. Even like in my humble opinion, I don't even know if it's within law. Is it illegal to say that you agree to pay the buyer's broker 3%, but the buyer's out of pocket cost will be no more than, let's say, 2.5%, like your example, right? That you would say your out of pocket actual exposure will be no more than 2.5%, but you can get paid up to 3%, let's say, for an example. In a lot of professions, we have contract limitation provisions that say my out of pocket, even though you can make 3%, my personal out of pocket is a max of 2.5%. But the new NAR settlement says not a range. Is that a range? I see. So, but my buyer's compensation is no more than 2.5%. But isn't that kind of a range? So I don't have an answer for you yet. So that's why I omitted that option, because is that a range or not that a range? I think that it's not fair that you can't have that financial arrangement with the buyer to say that your out of pocket's going to be only 1.5 or 2.5%, and whatever, and you agree that I can receive compensation up to 3% as long as I get it from somewhere else. Why is that not allowed at this point? I don't think that's allowed. I'm not willing to put my neck on the line for it. So, okay, so did you get the new GG? So this contract is contingent upon seller's broker and buyer's broker, or seller and buyer's broker executing a compensation agreement with terms acceptable to buyer. So basically, this creates the same kind of contingency that I've created. Okay, so this works. In fact, I think this is fine to even use this. Okay, just understand that the buyer is on the hook for the compensation because of the BBA or the showing agreement. That's what obligates the buyer. But for your own due diligence, if you know your buyer's relying on you to get paid because the buyer's going to get a credit, you need to fend for that buyer and make sure that buyer is realizing that if that compensation agreement isn't signed and you use this addendum, you need to terminate it within the time frame allowed. Does that all make sense? Okay, so again, the buyer's obligated to pay the buyer's agent because of the BBA or the showing agreement. This contingency says we're going to get something signed within that 3 days. Okay, if not, then the buyer can terminate the contract. You need to execute the right to terminate within the time frame. 3 days thereafter. Yeah, 3 and 3. Okay. Okay. I don't personally like this. I liked mine because it just says, here's both agreements. Sign both and send both back, or sign both and counteroffer both and send them both back. Okay. As opposed to adding more time frames that you have to pay attention to, but it works. It's okay. My statement was just more of a contingency that was open ended. Any questions there? Am I on the right track? C2.
Get out of the contract. I feel like we should have it on negotiated contract.
Yes,
Let's negotiate the deal, right? Let's not say, hey, we're under contract, but we still gotta have. I'm sorry. That's all right.
the comment Mike was making was, for those on the Zoom, is that the idea that really should all be negotiated right out the gate. But as long as they're tied together, they can still be negotiated out the gate. They could all be. You could still use this rider and present the seller to buyer broker compensation right on the same thing. And they're really, at the time, the 3 days is going to really apply because it's all being negotiated. But just make sure your goal is to package deal this whole thing. Here's what the seller's paying, the buyer's paying the seller for the house. This is what the seller's paying the buyer's broker. They're all contemporaneous documents. Okay, so moving it back to my summary. Alternate methods, statement and the purchase and sale agreement. This is 1C2. Alternate method, statement and the seller purchase agreement for the seller to pay buyer's broker together, right under additional terms under the main contract to seller contract. Buyer to seller contract. Seller will compensate ABC Realty 2.5% of the purchase price at closing of the property. This has the problem that the brokers are not parties to the contract, and the seller and buyer can agree to simply remove this provision in the contract, and the brokers have no recourse. The broker has no recourse. Now, if the buyer has a proper BBA, that's not good, shouldn't matter, or proper showing agreement. Okay, because remember, the buyer's obligation to pay the buyer's broker is a freestanding agreement. But if it's removed from the contract, we're not, and the parties would just simply remove it, and you don't have a good BBA, then you're certainly screwed. Okay. I had a recent example of this that just happened to us. We went to salvage a deal. The parties executed an addendum, changing the closing to my law firm, and then behind my back, they went and changed it back to the first title company after they resolved their issue that I was going to resolve for them. I wasn't happy, but they took it upon themselves to remove me out of the contract. And just as easily as I got removed, if you rely on doing it this way, you can just as easily be removed. So I'm not saying to use this way, but I'm telling you, be prepared that there may be agents that do use it this way. Okay. Any questions about that? Okay, then we have the last one, which is the alternate method is the general statement for a bucket of money credit to the buyer. Right under additional terms of the main contract, seller will give X amount of money of the purchase price at closing as a closing credit. Now, this is a general bucket of money scenario. This is also fine, but there's a couple implications here. Here is a general bucket of money for the buyer to use for whatever they want, including commission or closing costs. Risk, very important that you have a standalone BBA so your buyer knows you are deducting your money out of that credit. Second risk, if the buyer is getting a loan, you may exceed what the lender will allow for credit for a specific loan product. The direct payment from seller to buyer's broker, the two options above, does not affect the loan for the buyer. So again, a payment from the seller to the buyer's broker never comes on the buyer's side of the closing statement, will have no effect on that process. Benefit to the consumer. If the consumer is only paying 1% to the buyer's broker and the contract says a general 3% credit, then it appears that is the seller has to pay to get this deal done. But for the consumer, this allows them to put the 2% in their pocket. So you may see that example of of an offer like it for me. I put my buddy Matt, who's does one deal every 10 years as my broker, so I get 3% back on my purchase price, my effective purchase price. I'm not the normal buyer. That's me. I'm the investor buyer. Okay, but you don't know that on the seller side. You just know you were thinking in your head, I'm paying 3%, so there's the 3%, and I just got 3% off the purchase price. I'm showing this to you because those that are here do these kinds of things are going to see that happen because there could be the savvy investor types. You could also have an agent on the buyer side that has no idea what they're doing, and this is how they figured they're going to do it, and that's how they did it, and it's just going to work that way. Michael, do you have any comments about oh, and there's also this new rider that Byron will put up on Michael Cochran FF.
Most of you should have a seller concession sheet in front of you. This is great to have if you're going to write your contracts in this particular way, because specific loan products, you can only give a credit and do that particular loan if it meets those buckets. So if you're trying to offset a commission or whatever, and the seller is giving a 5% credit or a 3% credit or 2% credit, each loan program allows a certain percentage. So if you look on your chart, so if you look on this chart and say you're doing an investment property and the seller's going to give 3%, you can't do an investment loan. You'll lose 1% because it only goes up to 2%. But if you were doing a conventional, more than 25% down, you actually can get up to 9% seller credit. So this is just good to have handy if you're going to go that route. It's very specific.
And just on my sheet that I prepared, Michael gave his 2 cents, and I really appreciate that he did that. But even since then, we've got this now. So, so we've got more changes to what Michael has previously already looked at. And like we've got 3 mics here. Geez, we make it nice and easy for everybody. So this is our new one. This credit to the buyer's broker compensation. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. It makes sense. It is designed for that credit to the buyer to cover the buyer's compensation. And it specifically directs that if the amount exceed what the buyer's, this is the big thing that I like, if the amount exceeds what the buyer's lender will allow, the seller will pay the difference directly to the buyer's broker. See that it covers right there. In the event the credit described above exceeds the amount by buyer's lender for such contributions, then to the extent permitted by buyer's lender, obviously if nothing's checked, the balance of the credit will be paid by seller directly to the buyer's broker. So that would cover the scenario where the idea is if you're representing the buyer's agent and you're doing this, don't try to get into the position to do the general bucket of money, because you get into this mess that Michael is going to have to try to help guide you on. So if you're here, you're probably not going to do this. You're going to have a seller to buyer broker directly, and we're never going to have this problem. If, however, you're going to do it this way, hopefully, again, you call Michael and you verify before you write the whole offer up what compensation what credits can be allowed, and are you going to violate any loan products, those kinds of things. But if you miss all that and you somehow are here and well enough to catch and open your eyes and your ears for this few seconds and you use FF Rider, then again, you would still be covered that at least the balance of the credit that the lender won't allow will get paid from the seller to the buyer's broker directly. So you're still going to get all the compensation you're entitled to. You also may see, now going back to my handout, Byron, on 1C3, number 6, you may see instances where there are 2 statements, one for a credit from the seller to buyer broker for closing costs and one from the seller to buyer's broker to pay commissions. That's okay. That's okay. You can still do a credit for closing costs and you can still have a seller to buyer broker. They don't have to be combined, and they shouldn't be, quite frankly. So it's okay to still have a credit for closing costs separate and distinct from whatever the seller is paying the buyer's broker. Does that make sense? Oh, yes, it's absolutely. Anything, the whole old-fashioned way, well, the general credit from seller to buyer's, from seller as a general bucket of money or the old-fashioned way of a seller's listing broker paying the buyer's broker. Both are frowned upon and should not be used if you can avoid it. But that doesn't mean they're illegal or not allowed at the moment. It
You have
just
a
as a best
question?
practice, we shouldn't be doing it. Go ahead.
Well, I have a VA buyer, and VA buyers are not allowed to pay their broker. So I called their mortgage person to say, how is VA getting around this? And they said it's coming out of their closing costs. So it's
I'll let Michael Cochran address that.
So VA allows 4%, specifically on here. So what is your question? Give me a specific example if you could. Correct. So it's 4%. So as long as you're within that number, you're okay, and you can do up to 2 discount points on that. It basically says closing costs, prepaids, discount points, and can include debt payoff up to 4% for VA. So it doesn't exclude anything specific.
As far as I know, PA has extended that ruling where the buyer cannot pay their agent as long as it's reasonable and customary for that market. The VA buyer, can pay their agent's commission. Hence the reason that a VA buyer can sign a buyer brokerage agreement with a commission in there stating that they're going to pay it.
The confusion that I've heard is if the purchase price is 300, the maximum loan amount is 100%. So let's say the appraisal and the purchase price are the same, it's 300,000. You can't roll it in. So it can't be, 306 because of the commissions. So you're just capped at that. You can't roll it in. Or it can be the concession. Yeah.
Okay, so my back. Okay, so modifying the existing listing that occurred before the changes. Do I need to address that? Okay, all right. And quite frankly, if I did, I would hand the mic over to you guys because that's not really a function that I'm involved in at the moment. Listing agent, what can you do? What can you put in the MLS, aka concessions? So when we wrote this, we had concessions. This was written for the purposes of we're on number 3. This is for purposes of other MLSs that may allow concessions. You know, I I think my I'm cautious to not commit the seller to advertise that I'm going to do something or I am doing something. So if you notice that where I put under H, I put seller is anticipating offering a concession for costs and fees to buyers based on the sales price to be fully agreed upon in the contract. If you something more generic like that is going to be more acceptable. It doesn't commit a seller to doing anything. It just says we'll figure it out in the contract. Okay. The old-fashioned way, listing number 4, the old-fashioned way, listing broker paying selling broker, not recommended. You cannot offer compensation from listing broker to buyer's broker on the MLS, but it may be handled privately. I urge you to, it's on the ad hoc. My seller is prepared, much better. But it is still technically acceptable to say that my seller is going to pay me and I'm going to pay it. As a company standpoint from Ruttenberg, this is a no-no. I think it's a right move, but I'm not to say that you as a buyer's agent, however, that is still a green light for you guys as buyer's agents for Ruttenberg. The idea that you're going to get paid from the listing agent, am I right? Ruttenberg will still accept a check from a
That's why I grabbed the
agent.
microphone. We're not sharing it from the list side, but if you're getting paid the other side, Angela and I just talked about this, we're certainly going to allow that because we want you to get paid.
So we've all collectively understood that. So I'm not crossing anybody up on this panel here. You could still get paid if you're the buyer's agent from the listing agent. Do I think it's the wrong way of doing it? Yes, but I'm not going to tell somebody else how to do their job, and neither should you. We just have to roll with the punches. So again, same kind of thing goes. You're going to want to make sure you have a compensation agreement just understand your compensation now is not being paid from the seller, it's being paid from the listing broker. So again, you need that proper form. Um, let me look here to see. So on the listing side of the agreement, actually, I'm going to skip that because you shouldn't be doing it anyway. On 4C, I discuss on how to fill out the listing agreement. If you were to do it, that you were paying you were charging the 6% to your seller and then sharing the compensation, you would write the 6% in 8A. You would not do the additional terms like I mentioned on the front side about unrepresented. And then you would pick under 10A what compensation you as the listing broker are offering to the buyer's broker. I'm just the mechanics, that would be how it would work if you were doing it, quote, the old fashioned way. You will, if you under 4D, okay, if you don't have the agreement in place, okay, from the listing broker to the buyer's broker, you'll need to write some sort of this contract is contingent upon a signed listing broker to buyer's broker compensation agreement with ABC Realty. I go on to the same example that I used with checking the box other. You need to somehow tie your offer in because remember, the MLS, the whole system before the change was the MLS was an agreement between brokers that if compensation was offered, compensation would be paid. You don't have that agreement anymore. So the only way you're getting paid as a buyer's broker is if you have a buyer's broker agreement either with the seller or with the listing agent, okay, to pay that compensation. I got a question earlier is, well, does my buyer have to pay twice what they agreed to pay me versus what I'm getting from the seller side? The answer should be no, because in the buyer's broker agreement, it says any obligation to commission will be offset by payments made to the buyer's broker from other sources. Okay. So you don't get paid twice in that instance. But you do need to make sure that your compensation agreement is signed because you don't want the seller signing the contract with you not having the listing agent to buyer's agent broker compensation form in place. So you need to make something in there that says that the contract is contingent, which is what I did. Guys, am I on track there? Okay.
Yep, spot on.
So make sure you have something signed because if not, then the buyer is going to be paying you out of pocket through the BBA or the showing agreement. Does everybody follow that? You have to have something signed in place before that contract is signed or contemporaneously. But the problem is if you're doing it contemporaneously, here's my offer, here's my seller listing agent to buyer's agent compensation form. What's going to stop the seller from signing that contract by itself? You have to tie it together, which is what I put when I added this contract is contingent upon the listing broker to buyer's broker agreement with ABC Realty. You have to tie them together or you have to have the compensation agreement signed in advance prior to making the offer. We good there, guys? Am I on track there? Okay.
Nope.
Okay.
Right there.
All about the buyer's agent. Okay, so I'm going to run through the BBA, all properties. Everything that you want to see, you're going to get paid a commission regardless if you show it to me or not. That's what a BBA is. A showing agreement is property specific, has to list specific properties. It's a BBA, but it's only for that property. Works the exact same way. Same mechanics, same type of agreement. One is blanket, one is property specific. Do I like them? No, I don't like them because it doesn't really work that way greatly in the real world, but in reality, is it clear to the consumer? Yes, because from the consumer standpoint, a BBA says no matter what you buy, I'm going to be paid. Very clear for the consumer to understand. A showing agreement, very clear for the consumer. If my property is not listed on that showing agreement, I'm not paying a commission. So you need to use those rules and understand that if you don't have a BBA, if your property agreement doesn't have your property address, you're not getting paid on that property. I don't like it because it doesn't allow a flexible arrangement where it says only the properties you show me I should get paid. A procuring cause type of definition. We don't have that option really yet, in my opinion, of great option. Am I good there?
You're absolutely right. Correct.
Yeah. So it is what it is. It's the process is now more consumer friendly so that they understand when they owe something and when they don't. Okay. If you sign an agreement for 2.5% and you're going to get 3, you got to modify it. Okay. If you show 3 on the BBA, but you're only going to get 2, you still get 3 unless you have an amendment to that agreement. So if you have a BBA that says 3%, but your contract with the seller only says 2.5, you get the delta from the buyer. If you think your buyer is not going to be prepared to pay that, then you should be amending it. But I mean, that's up to you if you want to do the right thing. But if you don't amend it, you get the delta, the half a point from the buyer. Okay.
On the BBA, you said it's blanket, so it doesn't have to be like particular specific for each property. I can say Pinellas Park, Dunedin.
The BBA says any property I buy in this time frame, you're going to be my agent and I'm going to pay you a compensation. That's what a
On the
BBA.
one well, not on the one that he made. It says location, so I'm just like Pinellas County, Hillsborough County. I'm covering all counties so that I don't have to keep doing that. Okay, cool.
Yeah. The BBA basically says even if I find a property, I'm going to call you and you're going to help me buy it. Okay. So showing agreements property specific, the BBA is across the board. My last comment is, what do you do when the seller tries to nix the buyer's agent's commission? I think this is the biggest thing, is the biggest concern a lot of you may have, which is how do I handle it? I put an offer in and I put 3% for 200,000. The seller comes back, I accept the 3% and I'm paying you a half a point. What do you do when you get that counter offer back? Talk to the listing agent. Say, why did I get cut from a norm? I didn't go from 3% to 2.5. I went from 3% to a 0.5%. That's like a slap in the face. What is the seller's problem? Call the other agent. Start talking to them. Then you're in sales. Okay, you are in sales. Your job is to sell property, make deals happen. What would it take? My seller wants to net 200 grand. Well, then I really need to bump the counter offer. Really needs to be 215. Okay, to cover the difference. Will 215 do it? And still, because my buyer still has to pay me 2.5%, but they want to roll this thing. And it's hard to sell a number on a. You need to be working on net. What is it going to actually cost me for this house? 215. Okay. Now you call your buyer up. Don't just blindly forward them the offer. Say, look, I spoke to the listing agent that got a counter offer, but the price is going to be 215. Do you want me to write it up as a counter offer to show, and that will cover my fee, the 215? And tell them, and then send it to them at the 215. Show and put your 3% back in, and say, here it is. We're going to counter offer them again at 215 because they were nixing everything. But look, it's going to be the 215 because that gets me paid. That covers all your obligations at 215. All your obligations. Okay, that covers everything. So I'm never saying deceive your clients, but talk and start working these numbers before you blindly send them to the other side. And so you could preface the buyer. When I did short sales all the time, that was the first thing we did. We got the numbers, the bank cut all the fees, and then I had to go to the drawing board to figure out how I was going to make the math work. Make the math work before you call your buyer and say, this is how I'm going to make that happen for you. If you give it to them with how the math's going to work and they can stomach the number, you did your job. To hit them with how to figure it all out, people don't think for that. They think 215 does the deal. Okay, 215. I guess that's what I got to do. So, guys, and I'm sorry I rushed through it, but I tried to cover as much as I can on this thing. So,
I want to give a list of what we've got coming up on the calendar. Tomorrow morning, you get the broker update again with 3 of the 4 of us. So, what do we have any special guests, or is it just us? It's just us. It's just all right. Tomorrow that's at 10 a.m. No, that's Zoom. Zoom. Every Wednesday. Tomorrow at 11 in the classroom, we have a Canva workshop with Byron. Who else is there? Byron and Candace tomorrow at 11. Then obviously next Wednesday, again, we have the broker update at 10 a.m. and there is a 11 a.m. forms workshop in-house in the classroom at Charles Ruttenberg. Okay, so the new forms. And then on the 19th, there's a class on renovation loans with Michael Cochran of CMG. I think, is that just Zoom or is that Zoom? That's Zoom. And then our next pro panel is October 29th. I think that's it from me. Michael, you got anything?
well, I just want to say, you guys are here. You're the ones spending the time and effort doing these transactions and trying to understand this. My purpose of what I put together here was to try to give you all the variables of what you might see. but I think I made it clear, like, you should be out of the paying of the sharing. You don't want to be sharing compensation. Ruttenberg doesn't allow it. Okay. Understand how these forms work. Understand this is going to be a changing process. Think about selling. Okay. Understanding the math on what the net result of the transactions are going to cost you. And I think the biggest, most important thing is integrity title. Please use us for closings. Okay. We're here to support you as the agent with the understanding if we support you all, you'll help us with closing. So I really do appreciate for those that do use us and those that'll give us a shot. Please consider using Tina and I at Integrity Title. Michael?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I don't see anybody else out here coming out and training and working with us, rolling their sleeves up with CMG and integrity. I love integrity title because you can just say, I closed with integrity. I like that. That's a broad encompassing term. I closed with integrity. Hey, so real quick, I'm going to wrap this up. Byron sent me a couple of Zoom questions. The question is, do we as CRR agents only use CRR forms because the transaction desk forms may not be up to date, or you, CRR, may not support other forms or contracts? So right now, the answer to that is use what we have in our dashboard. We're giving you all these options. Use what we have. Again, just because Florida Realtors has approved and sent out a form doesn't mean that we have. Right off the bat, we stopped using some of those, the broker to broker form. Many brokerages followed our suit with that as well. That was question one of them. The other one is, does the seller even have to commit to being prepared to, I think, pay a commission in amount 10B? What if they don't know what they want to offer? Can they just indicate on 10C that they aren't committing to offering any compensation to the buyer's agent and then wait to negotiate the amount during the offer process? Who is this? Because that is exactly what you're supposed to do, Joe Martino. Thank you, Joe. That's awesome. Why in the world are you setting an amount for them? It makes no sense. Tell your seller to be open. That probably the buyer's gonna need to finance their commission. Be open for it coming in, and then you don't give all these other scenarios you have to do if you've offered a commission in a certain amount. So we are 11:59. I got 1 minute to wrap up with what happened at Florida Realtors. Y'all know I'll never do that in a minute, but real quick, the 4 approved BBAs we have, we think the best one out there, the most user-friendly, consumer-friendly, is the one that I put together. And I don't want to be in the forms business, but Florida Realtors was really late to the game. You guys need a buyer's agreement, so I whipped one out with a lot of work. Here, giving me a lot of counsel on it. We took it from some other different forms and merged it together. Now, it's in there. It's the 4th one. It's an exclusive 2-pager buyer broker agreement. Now, I'm going to take the heat for it not looking as pretty as it should. The content is great. I'm in the process right now, having somebody prepare the document to make it look prettier. I'm not changing anything. I just want to put it, maybe I should send it to Michael because he puts together a really nice agreement. Amir and I send him chicken scratch and he turns it into something. I would be using that one. We're not telling you which one to use. You've got 4 choices up there. Use whatever you want. But if you want one that has teeth in it, is consumer friendly, use the one that we have in there. It's a 2-pager buyer broker agreement. The last thing, at Florida Realtors, there was a lot going on over there at the convention. I just kind of want to bring you up to date on the current market conditions, guys. It's bad news. It has nothing to do with the NAR settlement, by the way. We're in a terrible market. Y'all understand that. It's just a bad market. We're on track to have the 2nd worst year in terms of units sold, the 2nd worst year in the last 30 years. Okay, so we're going to tell you the bad news. There's also good news to come with that. So the current market inventory is up. Townhomes and condos are only almost up 100% year over year. Days on market is going up. By the way, this is all in SunStats, guys. You have a free membership to SunStats. Grab it, use it. It's all out there. Amir put the slides up that we used. I think there were 60 slides. Byron still got them. We used about 15 of them. I would be using it in my listing presentations, letting them know what's going on. So days on market are up. Closed deals are off almost 35-40% year over year. That's all the bad news. 2nd worst year. Good news is there's a ton of pent up demand. There's a ton. Buyers and sellers both. It's going to be a weird situation. Mike and I talked about this. We're going to see sellers have had pent up demand to sell too. They couldn't because they were trapped in sub 3% mortgages. I wouldn't trade in my 3% mortgage to go get a 7% one. It makes no sense. So they're waiting to come down to buy. Buyers have gotten on the sideline. Predictions are saying that we're going to do about 4 million transactions this year. The prediction for 2025 is 5 million. Okay, you can do some quick math. That's up 20%. And if those are your deals, you're going to be just fine. But the reason I tell you all this, and by the way, interest rates are on the way down. Michael can talk to you about that. Um, Two things. I think you should be talking to agents about referrals. Agents that don't want to do the business the new way. I know a lot of people my age suffered through the 2008, 2010 ugly situation that was out there. They've made some money and they're not doing it again. They saved their money this time. Those are the agents that I'd be talking to that if they're getting out of the business, I want to be your referral partner. Don't let them just hang their shingle up and go home. They still know a ton of people. They have a sphere of influence. You can talk to me. I have a simple method about a 5-year buyout from them. Doesn't cost you any money out of your pocket. I'll tell you how that works. You can do 50, 40, 30, 20, 10% referrals, pay them out, keep them motivated to tell you everything that's going on. So with that said, guys, we've got to wrap this up. Do you got anything you need to close on?
Just thank everybody for great job you guys been doing.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming, guys. You guys are the ones that are staying out ahead of it. Thank these guys. They're not getting paid a nickel today to come here for this. So thank you. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Hey, we'll see you guys all next time.